Hey kids, welcome to Intro to Painting. You're in the right place if you're doing the O'Keefe copy. Otherwise, look for instructions on Canvas. And here we go. The first step is to find a piece of paper exactly the same size as your canvas, which is 9 inches by 12 inches. We're going to create the drawing on that piece of paper, and then we are going to transfer that onto the canvas when it's done. As you notice, I've already gridded the photograph for you. It should be on your screen. And I'm now going to grid my paper with the same pattern. You can use any pencil and ruler for this. First step is to connect the opposite corners like this. Then we want to go straight across through the center. I'm going to use a second piece of paper to keep my line horizontal by lining it up along the edge, and then drawing along the top edge of the paper like that. And I'm going to do the same thing for my vertical. You could also use math. This is 9 by 12. You could mark 4.5 here, 4.5 here, and have even more accurate results. And then we're going to connect all of these corners. And finally, we're going to go straight through the center of these X's horizontally. And vertically. Now, if you're really confident in your drawing ability, you could probably turn off the video about now and just start drawing. But for those who wish, I'm going to talk you through it. It's important to just focus on one triangle at a time. So I'm going to try zooming into this quadrant here and do the same thing with the O'Keefe. And notice that in this triangle here, there is a boundary that runs like that. That's about all we have up there. Notice that this point here is about a little more than halfway across the top of that triangle. So I'm going to mark where that starts. Notice that this intersection is less than halfway between the corner and the other corner. It's not quite in the middle. So I'm going to mark where that is. And then this one is just a little bit in from the outside edge. And then I'm going to draw a line. Now I'm going to go over here. And again, I'm going to change colors. We've got an intersection right here, which is about a quarter of the way down this line. And another intersection here, which is about a third of the way from the bottom. And notice that this curve comes pretty close to the top edge of the painting. And then we're going to make this curve. We can always go back and edit things we don't like. This other curve is pretty simple. And now we're going to be going into this next triangle, and we're sort of continuing this direction, then diving down a little. And then notice we're just going to be cropping out a little tiny corner of that triangle right here. So I'm going to draw that first and then connect back to it like that. Inside this triangle, there's a couple other shapes. This continues down to about there. And there's this looping form. And from within that, there are these two other looping forms. And this sort of fades out. And the last thing we have in this section is this little line right here. And I'm going to say to myself that this line intersects this right about in the middle. So I'm going to find the middle of this line, and I'm going to bring that down. This changes direction a little bit, and it intersects this line here, again, right about in the middle. And then it intersects this line down here about a third of the way from the inside corner. Like that. This intersection here is about 3/4 of the way up from here. So go up 3/4 of the way. And then I just curve this down until it meets almost at a point right there. And finally, in this quarter of the painting, we have to find this curve here. So we're going to start about 3/4 of the way up this edge. It's going to intersect this line about 2/3 of the way up that edge. It intersects here about halfway. And then it lands almost at this point here, right about here. Now, once I know where I'm going to intersect my lines, I can just freehand the curve the way I see it. Finally, I can see that this line that I started with sort of fades out and does a little jog like that. And there's also a very faint kind of curve in here that I'm going to add. So now I'm going to move across to the next quadrant. Now I already know where this form begins here. Now I want to find where it ends. And I'm going to say the ending is about a quarter of the way over from this line and about a fifth of the way up this one. I have to sort of find that intersection. So I'm going to go a quarter of the way over here and a fifth of the way up here and find the intersection. Then I'm going to loop this across and make sure this form ends right there. I feel like I don't have quite enough space between here and here. So I'm going to make a small correction and just make that form a little bit fatter. I'm going to look at the shape of this triangle here, the negative space created inside that corner. I'm just going to copy it. Noticing that this should be coming a little more than a quarter of the way over from that corner. Then I'm going to continue that angle. And notice that this curve is going to have to land right up here, which is only about a fifth of the way down. Then I can finish the curve. There's another curve sort of inside this. I'm going to freehand it. And I'm going to freehand this one as well. This continues down into the next triangle, forming a little hook. Which I can freehand because I already can see where this curve needs to land. It lands over here with the curve I already made. There's a little curve underneath this thing. And I can see where that's going to land too. It lands on the hook. And there's a final curve inside here, which I can freehand because I have enough shapes around it to see what's going on. Now we're going to move down into this triangle. I can see already where this form begins. And I can see how this curve continues and meets it at a point. And I'm going to have to land, I would say that's about 3/5 of the way up from this corner down here. So I go up half and then a little more to here. And that's where that intersection is going to happen. This intersection is right about in the middle of this line. And this curves out and back like that. Now you might look at a corner like this and say, well, there's really nothing going on, but we'd like to have a few boundaries inside every triangle because this is going to tell us where to put our paint. So I'm going to draw this color change. Notice that this is more towards a very pale tint of blue, and this is a very pale yellow green. So I'm going to sketch some of these boundaries. And finally, this beginning point here is just a little bit above the middle of this edge. This intersection is about a quarter of the way up here. And this landing point is about a little less than halfway across here. So that gives us this kind of a curve. Now we still have this curve that launches from here, comes around, almost touches this line. And then where does it intersect? I would say this is about a third of the way between here and here. Comes around. And now before I finish this curve, I want to draw this thing. Notice that this is about a fifth of the way between here and here. So I'm going to mark a fifth and then 2/5. Those were a little big. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Still a little big. There we go. And there's the form. And now I can, whoops, that was a little too tall. Now I can bend that around. And this one. And we're off to the next section. Working our way around clockwise. So we're going to try to find the landing point of this form. That's a critical intersection. And it's about 1/5 of the way over here and about 1/3 of the way up. So I'm going to plot that point, go 1/5 of the way over, 1/3 of the way up. Gets me right about there. I call this technique fractional thinking, which you've heard a lot if you've taken the drawing classes. Artists are always talking to themselves this way when they're drawing, thinking, where's the middle? If something's not centered, what fraction are we seeing? And with practice, you get very good at seeing thirds and halves and quarters and so on. Notice that this curve is easy because it comes down just about as far as that point. And we need to aim for an intersection that's a little less than halfway up this line. So we're going to be aiming for right there. And then we're going to connect with this curve that we already made. So this is going to bump out just a little and then flow around to that. I would say I can probably freehand this because it's an easy curve. It just fits right behind this one. And this one also shouldn't be too much difficulty. Now if I look at this whole curve here and think about where these two curves come out of it, notice they don't come out of the middle, they come out a little bit to the right of the middle. This is in the middle here, and then this one is up from it. So we're going to go through the middle of this curve for that first stem, and then the second one. Then the last one just barely goes into this corner. See that? Now I've already found this point here. I need to find this one here and this one. So I'm going to say this is a third of the way along here, and this is about a third of the way along there. So I go a third of the way over, a third of the way up. And I've just noticed something. Made this stem a little bit too skinny because I'm not going to hit a third. So I've got to make those a little bit fatter. To bring this edge closer to where it needs to be. Now if I zoom out for a second, I can see that the curves I made are not really going to connect the way I want them to, which means I made a little error up here. I'm just going to redraw this, make sure that this arcs gracefully down to that one. Now that I found this arc, I can just check where it lands, which is here, right about in the middle of the base of this section, and then continue it. And I can continue these stems, noticing that they land inside this triangle, not the next one. And I can locate this little triangle shape, noticing that it's about as high as this intersection. And continue the curve, trying to land in the middle of this rectangle here. And I'm going to sketch in some of these color boundaries. Noticing that this dark color carries almost to this line. And finally, I want to connect this line. It's going to flow up into this earlier curve, right like that. Okay, now we're going to do the last section. And I want to mark here and here. Notice that this is a little, well, I'd say it's actually very close to the center of this. This is just maybe a little below the center of that, and this here is about a third of the way up. So start with a third of the way up, a little below the center, exactly in the center. And having found these marks, I can gracefully continue this curve along here. And there's a little color boundary along here. And this curve is going to begin about a third of the way over along this edge, intersects a little past the halfway mark on here, and it ends right near the intersection of these triangles. There's a color boundary along here, and that about does it. So if we zoom out, compare the finished drawing with the gridded painting. Looks pretty good. Once you see the whole thing in front of your eyes, you might see a couple things you want to change. I think I'm going to make this curve a little softer and make this tip of this petal a little pointier. You can feel free to make your own edits. And I'm going to make one more color boundary right along here. And finally, to get your drawing ready for transferring onto the canvas, you're going to turn it over and you're just going to shade the entire back of your paper, which, since you're stuck at home and have nothing but time, should not be too much of a hardship. You can even do this while you're watching TV. And having done that, I didn't do the whole sheet, but you're going to. You'll be able to transfer the drawing to your canvas by just tracing over your lines another time, and they will go onto the canvas like that. Once your canvas is prepared, you can go back over the lines if you want to and darken them, and we'll start painting next time. Thank you.